I'm Colette Cassley, so I work in property licensing within Newcastle, so if you can save your rotten fruit to throw at the end, I'd appreciate it so I can get through this. So I just want to talk a little bit about the new licensing scheme that starts at the 5th of April. Hopefully that's not any bad news that anybody knows that. I know one landlord didn't know about it, but we'll have a new licensing scheme that starts 5th of April this year. I have such a good habit of breaking these things. Is it? Oh, the down one. There we go. I'm very gifted at breaking remotes. So in Newcastle, we'll have 3 types of property licensing. And what I want to do is just go through the 3 different types. So most of you will know, but applications are open for the new scheme and landlords are applying for the wrong type of license. So once they apply for the wrong type, we can't change it on the system. So I'm just trying to get the information out there on what type you will need. So we'll have mandatory HMO licensing, we have selective licensing, and we have additional licensing. So selective licensing, it's in designated areas of the city, which I will go through in a minute. So you can either have one person living in the house alone, you can have 2 unrelated people living in the house, so a couple, or you can have a family. So any one of those options would need a selective license if it was in a designated selective area. For additional, it's 3 people from 2 or more households, so either those 3 people aren't related, or it's a couple and a friend, or it's 4 people sharing the property. A mandatory HMO license is 5 or more people who aren't related, or they're from 2 or more households, and that can go all the way up to, well, as many as the property will hold. So mandatory is slightly different in that it's national. It's been running since 2006, and you will get a 5-year license from when you apply, and when that expires, you will get a 5-year license. So the licenses roll on. So mainly we'll talk about selective and additional. They're the ones that come in on the 5th of April. So for selective licensing, we have the new areas are Columbia Grange, Cowgate. We had the last 5 years. It's got a few amendments, a few streets have changed. We've got Denton Court, and we have what we call the HHRS, which is Howdean Road, Howlett Hall Road, Ravenswood and Swinley Gardens. We have Leamington, which is new for this 5 years. We have the West End. There's been slight tweaks to the scheme on that. Some bits have been taken out, some have been added in. We've already got Biker Old Town in place, so if you have a licence in Biker, that runs till 2026. You don't need to, this scheme doesn't include Biker, and it doesn't include Greater High Cross, so those schemes are currently running. If you've got your licence in place, that will stay in place till 2026, 30th of September 2026. So Columbia Grange is just a small block of houses in the Kenton ward, and I drove past there yesterday and was horrified by the amount of rubbish that was in the gardens. So we've had a lot of problems in that area with antisocial behaviour, with rubbish. So that's come into our licensing scheme this year. Anybody got any properties in Columbia Grange? Oh, there we go. Yes. Oh, it was bad yesterday when I went. I'm not often shocked, but I was shocked. So yes, and you have your wish. It's not often I can say that. So Cowgate, it's similar to 2020. The only difference is, if I can just, so this little dipped bit here has come out mainly because we weren't having any problems with that area, and it was a lot of council housing which isn't covered with our privately rented. So that's tweaked a bit. I will say that the maps here for today are for visual reference. To get the streetlets, you need to read the designation, because we try and get them visually accurate, but it's difficult to get all the streets in. And you know, according to my map making there, I've got the central motorway in, which isn't selectively licensed. But just to be aware that it's the street list on the designations you need, and I'll show you where they are in a bit. So Denton Court, again, it's a little block off Silverlonnon, which again has a lot of antisocial behaviour, a lot of rubbish and waste problems. It causes a lot of issues for its size. It's small but mighty. The HHRS, so Howdean Road, Howlett Hall Road, Ravensbourne Gardens and Swinley. The majority of these are privately rented. That was in from 2020, so there shouldn't be too many surprises there for people. Leamington is a new one, and I was out Wednesday doing a leaflet drop in Leamington to try and make the landlords aware, because it's a new scheme. I got chatting with some lovely people there who some were very keen for licensing, some were not so keen, but I still had a nice chat to them anyway. So it's kind of the what I call the bottom half of Leamington, so to the Tyne view, and we're going to have a look at that, because that's where we're getting a lot of the antisocial behaviour and the issues in Leamington. I'm very sadly looking forward to Leamington, because it's a new area that I haven't had much dealing with. They're probably not looking forward to me, but that's not my fault. The West End, it's such a big area. The map's quite small. I've had to zoom out quite a bit. So there's a lot of the West End. So the bits that are different are, we've sort of included a bit on, I think that's the Granger Park Road, and we've sort of cut out this little bit there, which was sort of Clovelly Avenue, I think it was. So there are amends to that. So if you were in the 2020 scheme, check the designation, check the street list, because it might have changed a bit. So the property licence scheme is designated for high levels of antisocial behaviour and high levels of deprivation in the area. So Newcastle comes up quite high for antisocial behaviour, but I've just done a little graph here so you can see the levels of antisocial behaviour in each of those areas. Now, Columbia Grange and Denton Court, we do have high complaints, but because it's such a small area, it's not showing very well on the graph, but believe me, it causes a lot of work. So one of the smallest areas, which is the HHRS, has really high levels of antisocial behaviour. So the orangey red bit is the general ASB in Newcastle, and then each of these other wards, and you can see obviously they all top Newcastle for the amount of antisocial behaviour in them. So the other thing we're also looking at is deprivation in the area. So because some of the selective licensing areas cover different wards, they sort of cross over. There might be two bars, but basically the red one is the deprivation in Newcastle based to other local authorities, and I think we're 175th out of 319. So we're up there for deprivation. But you can see that the levels in Cowgate are quite, for the small area, it's quite high how much deprivation we have. And all of them rank quite high in the indices of deprivation across the city, not just within Newcastle. So that one, Cowgate, so the West End, as I said, it's such a big area, it covers a lot of different wards, and all of those are, within, it's the most deprived within that area. Again, we have Leamington. Bits of Leamington are more deprived than others, but haven't had a good tour of it. I can tell you what the high bits are and the little bits are, but just by looking at it. But again, it's high levels of deprivation and trying to put resources in there to help the tenants. So Columbia Grange, very high for how small an area it is compared to Newcastle. That's Denton Court. Again, it's a small block of flats, which is high levels of deprivation. So the HHRS, again, it's very happy in high levels of ASB, high levels of deprivation in the city. And that was just to kind of give you a bit of an idea as to why we're looking at it. So we'll look at who needs a licence. So every HMO in the city and every rented property that's located within one of the selective licensing areas will need a licence. The licence holder must be the most appropriate person to hold the licence. Usually it's the owner, it can be the managing agent if the managing agent want to do that. The licence holder must have the power to create and terminate the lettings, access all parts of the premises to the same extent of the owner, and authorise expenditure for emergency repairs. And the licence is specific to the property and the licence holder, so it's not transferable. So what we've done for this new scheme is we've set up a portal within our IT system in Newcastle. So if you have your phones, you can scan that code and it will take you to the portal logon. So it's the same portal if you have applied for any building permits or anything like that through building control. So it's one portal for Newcastle City Council. Chances are you might have already been on it. So I'll just leave that up in case anybody wants to have a little look.
Does anyone have any questions for Colette?
Oh, I'm not done yet. Oh no, I've got more. I'll just, oh, I can talk forever. So just, yeah, so we can flick back to that if anybody wants to look at the portal. I mean, of course, you've probably all got your licence applications in by now. So this is what the portal will look like. It says building applications on the main page. That was because building control got there first with IT and took up most of the space. So the interesting part that you will need is our tiny little menu over to the side here. So it says, you know, we've got home, we've got licensing home, apply for a licence, animal welfare, you can skip the licensing act. So anything, if you've had to apply for, say, a liquor licence and anything like that, chances are you would have been on this system. So our bits are licensing home, apply for a licence, and at the bottom, second from the bottom, it says property licensing. That's where you'd look to find your applications once you've done them. So you sign up for the portal. This is what the portal looks like. When you click on apply for a licence, there's different types of discounts you can get and different types of licensing. I'm not saying there's many discounts, there's a few. But for selective licensing, obviously it says you've got to pick the questions that apply to your property, and people are clicking on the wrong one at the moment. So we've got selective, we've got additional, we've got mandatory. People are clicking on renew a mandatory license when they want a selective because they're thinking they're renewing it for this new scheme. So it's a new license within selective. There's no renewal because it's a different scheme. So just to make that sure. So you've got to read the questions. You know, do you have any of the following? Have you purchased the property within the last month, 31 days? You get a £50 discount for that. I can see you're brewing questions already. If you have an EPC, rated C or above, and have purchased the property within the last month, you get the EPC discount, which is £100 off, and the new property discount, which is £50. So that one will knock £150 off. The sad one you might have to pick, I don't have an EPC certificate rated C or above, and I have not purchased the property in 31 days. That gives you no discount, that's the full fee. And I have an EPC certificate rated C or above for the property, which would give you £100 off. So the problem is all the fees are attached to the application form. So if you pick the wrong one and say, yes, I've got an EPC and I've applied for the property within 31 days so I can get £150 off, if there's no evidence of that, we can't accept that form because it's the wrong form and you've wasted your time filling it in, which is not going to make people happy. So I just wanted to go through them just so you're aware of you need to have a read and have a look. So same for additional, you would pick additional. It's the same discounts on the property. It's just obviously you've got more people in the property, so it's the 3 or the 4 people who are not related or from 2 or more households for additional. You also have mandatory HMO forms on there, but I didn't want to put them on there and confuse you. But again, it's the same discounts. So back into the portal, once you go to apply for a license, you've picked your type of license. This is what it looks like. You know, you pick your type. You can't change the type of license once you've picked that discount, and it's just a case of going through the properties, answering the questions. The form should be self-explanatory. I have had one query that if you've got a managing agent, you've got to click the button to say yes, and then that brings a drop down for you to fill in your managing agent. Otherwise, it's not there if you haven't got it. So just so you know about that one. Little bit too late, but just so you're aware. So what you'll need to apply is you'll need photographic ID and proof of address of the licence holder. So that can be their passport, their driving licence, photo ID. If the driving licence ID is up to date and it's got the correct address on, you can just use that as proof of address. If it's the passport, you might have to provide a utility bill for them. So if you're a managing agency applying on behalf of a licence holder, that's something you're going to need. So we have proof of who that person is. We have had people applying for properties that they do not own, which they don't own them, they've applied for them, we get all sorts. You'll need details of joint owners, freeholders. We do check that through Land Reg. If you've forgotten to put a joint owner on, we will add them on because we've legally got them on the Land Reg. We'll let you know, but it's just so you know. You'll need your room sizes, you'll need a floor plan, all your certificates and documentation, your antisocial behaviour policy, i.e. how you manage ASB in the property, and a management statement, so how you manage your complaints on a day-to-day basis. Again, things that were very familiar in 2020, so nothing too revolutionary there other than the photo ID. The old system used to use a second declaration, but it was very labour intensive for our staff. So we have our property licensing website. So on that website we have the current licence conditions, your street lists that are your designations, so that tells you your numbers, which streets are included. There's a link to the private rented service, which has landlord tools and advice. On the private rented service there's also a video on how to create an account through the portal, and that's under landlord support services. So that code, again, if you scan that, that'll take you to our website. So we have licence conditions, which many of you will be familiar with. So they're attached to things like production of safety certificates, provision of the fire detection systems, minimum room sizes, making sure you've got adequate refuse storage facilities and information, property inspections, tenancy management, management of antisocial behaviour, and any change of circumstances to the fit and proper status. So all of the conditions are the licence holder's responsibility. And what I've done is I've just put them up quickly here. A lot of you will be familiar with them because you attend the landlord talks that I do where I go through them in a bit of depth. But you know, it's common safety certificates that you should all have: your gas, your electric, making sure you've got your smoke alarms, that your electrical appliances and your furniture are safe, making sure you've got the certificates, your carbon monoxide alarms, making sure there's no refuse in the gardens or yards, making sure the licence holder will deal with any refuse complaints that they receive. I can, I'm not often told I'm too quiet. So making sure also your waste removal is by a lawful contractor, so you're not going to give it to somebody who's just going to fly tip it in a local green space. So licence holder must reside in the UK, make sure your property is inspected every 6 months, making sure your house is maintained on the exterior, notifying us of any changes, and making sure any money that is due for the licence fee is payable after 28 days. Making sure your tenants have a written statement of occupation, so your tenancy agreement, making sure you provide your tenants with documents, obtain reference, and making sure while you have all these licence conditions that the tenants have quiet enjoyment of the property because it is their home for the time being, they are living there. Making sure you protect your deposits or you take the deposits. Make sure you've got your management statement, and again, no refuse in the property or yard garden at the start of the tenancy. We're very keen on having no rubbish in the property. You've also got to have the property free from graffiti, which I did think to myself, I'm not going to have many of them, but I spotted one already just on the drive through the other day. Make sure you've got a written ASB response, so you have a policy and you're responding to your tenants if you get an antisocial behaviour complaint. The steps that you take to deal with the ASB, your tenancy agreement details, investigate any complaints you get, copies of warning letters to the local authority, and any ASB that's reported to the local authority, to police, that's a criminal. So if you find a cannabis farm while you're doing your inspections, let us or the police know. If you're invited to a case conference, attend, and you need to notify us if the property's vacant. So I know we had a query about sort of ASB previously, and the idea will be that if we have complaints about antisocial behaviour, when we are looking to, we send a property of notice enforcement to say we've got an issue in the property, we will let the licence holder know so they can implement their policy to deal with the ASB, so they can investigate it. So hope in the licence areas you will get an earlier warning, so it won't be down the line where you've had a notice served. Will involve you as we go along, so you get a chance to investigate and hopefully remedy the ASB. So we've had a lot of talks with landlords about the last scheme, how the last scheme went, and some of the concerns were that we were not holding the non-compliant landlords to account, and we were just not very good at shouting about it. So what we'll do going forward is landlords who are non-compliant, so they've had notices that they're not compliant with, or they've had civil penalties, they'll receive a 1-year licence at the full cost. We'll have extra checks on the certificates and inspections to make sure they're compliant, and then if their licence will be extended if there's no further compliance, so they will get heavier monitoring within the scheme. We'll also look, because there's a lot of deprivation that I was talking about, is putting in more support for tenants. So we have pathways in place where we'll speak to the tenants when we're there if they've got any income or financial support requirements, any employment or training support requirements, health and well-being, any other challenges to barriers or services. So if they have, we ask them those questions. If they need any help with anything, we can refer them into our support and progression colleagues who can put them in touch with GP practices and things, or debt recovery. And it's just very important if you're having non-payment of rent. I know a lot of landlords will look to say, oh, I'll give them an extra couple of months because they're struggling. It's important to let us know so we can refer them into these pathways and maybe get them some help with their debt recovery, debt help to recover that, because the more they get into the debt, some unscrupulous lenders will charge a hefty fee on that. So the earlier intervention, the better really that we can help them with.